What is BP curve? BP curve represents the balance of payment, which usually show us the current account, capital and financial account. However, in BP equation, we can see only trade balance and net capital inflows. This is because we assume that there is no income and transfer part in current account and no financial part in capital and financial account. Now, we have to consider the determinants of each element inside the equation. For export, the determinants are the foreign income and the exchange rate. If these two increases, then the export increases. For import, the determinants are the domestic income and the exchange rate. If the domestic income increases or the exchange rate falls, then the import increases. Lastly, net capital inflow is determined by the difference between the domestic and the foreign interest rates. If the gap between these two rates is bigger, so is net capital inflow. Now, what does BP equation tell us? Well, if the summation of each component equals 0, it means that the international reserve remains constant. If it is greater than 0, then the international reserve increases, and if it is less than 0, the international reserve decreases. And this is also the reason why we don't include the official reserve transaction in this equation.
How about the slope of the BP curve? Is it positive or negative? Of course, the BP curve has a positive slope. The question is why? So if the interest rate increase, it will also affect the net capital inflow to increase too. Then the balance of payment will turn to be positive and no longer 0. Next, the output will have to increase in order to make BP equal to 0 again. Therefore, when all increase, Y will also increase. In other words, O and Y have a positive relationship, so that's why the slope of the BP curve is positive. And what shifts the BP? There are three factors that shift the curve. The first one is foreign income. If foreign income increase, the export will also increase and lead to the improvement of the trade balance and make the left-hand side here greater than 0. So to make BP 0 again, the output will have to reduce. Hence, the BP curve will shift down to the right. And the second one is foreign interest rate. Suppose the foreign interest rate increase, the net capital inflow will decline and require the local interest rate to be increased in order to make BP 0 again. Then the BP curve will shift down to the right. And the last one is exchange rate. Assume the exchange rate decrease, the export will decrease. This will lead to a decrease in the trade balance. On the left-hand side says the balance of payment will be smaller than 0. So, to make BP 0 again, the interest rate R will have to reduce. Therefore, the BP will shift up to the left.
Earlier, we see that the BP curve is typically upward sloping. And this is also because we have an assumption of imperfect capital mobility. However, there is also a special case that the BP curve is a flat line. This is because we have an assumption of perfect capital mobility. Then, what do these two assumptions mean? Well, when we talk about the capital mobility, it is related to the cost of moving funds from one country to another. So, in the case of imperfect capital mobility, when we try to move funds like this, it is associated with some cost like transfer fee, which we commonly see in the real world. However, if we live in the world with perfect capital mobility, this process is completely free. So, suppose that there is a sudden increase in the foreign interest rate, and as there is no cost of moving funds at all, people will move all of the funds abroad, leaving no capital fund left in the domestic country. Therefore, this will cause the domestic interest rate to increase, and then all of the funds will move back to the domestic country. This process ends when the foreign and domestic interest rate are equal. And because of this, we can have a flat line BP curve that lies at the foreign interest rate.
So now you know something about BP curve, and it is important to know this because when seeing this together with ISLM model, you can know more precisely where the economy is moving. That's it for the BP curve. Thanks for watching.